good afternoon, or evening. We are so excited you are able to join us today. My name is Susan Evans, and I am a caregiver. My father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 12 years ago, and it felt like overnight I went from being a daughter to a caregiver, both for my father, concerned with the progression of his disease, and my mother, who literally became half-widowed. We kept my father at home as long as we could with caregivers and trips to adult daycare, but my father's behavior became too much for my mother, and I did not want to lose both my parents to this dreadful disease. We chose Kensington Senior Living for my father because of their expertise in memory care. He lived there 6 years, and the team took exceptional care of my father as part of their family and my mother, who visited him daily to have lunch. Thank you, Kensington, for the care of my family, and thank you for producing these educational webinars for the community. You're in for a treat today as Dr. James, partner and longtime friend of Kensington, shares an offering of advice on self-love and self-care. The Caregiver Awakening Project will assist you in being present in your daily life and will share realistic tips and tricks to practice. Dr. James will offer life practices for the morning, afternoon, and evening. Joining Dr. James today are Friends of Kensington's caregiver experts, Lisa Bricker and Christina Neill Bowen. Today, you will all receive a copy of the webinar to share with friends and families, and please respond to the email with any questions that you may have. Thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful evening. And please join me in welcoming Dr. James. Hello, Dr.
Thank you, Susan. How are you, Susan? Thank you so much.
We are doing great, and thank you again for joining us. And to our audience, enjoy yourselves, and thank you, Dr. James, for being such a good friend to Kensington.
I love you, Susan. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for making time out of your busy lives. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate you for taking this time. And I certainly appreciate Kensington providing this platform for all of us to come together and create community. I think when we give ourselves permission to step away from the doing and allow ourselves to consider what it feels like these days, to consider what we know is happening around us in the world, and take the heroic step to move into human being. I think many of us are really, really comfortable with the human doing side of us. But when it comes to human being, I think a lot of us, including myself, we struggle with that. We fidget looking for something to do, something to fix, something to take care of. And when we actually put ourselves in the front of the line on the to-do list, it can bring up a lot for us. I've had the honor and the blessing of being in the primary care role in medicine for nearly 30 years. And I remember so much when I was in my residency, moving into my first few years of clinical practice, I used to struggle so much with wanting to fix everything. Someone would come in and I would be immediately thinking about what I could do to help fix the situation. And I remember having an opportunity to step back one time and realize, more than anything else, one of the greatest lessons I could be presenting, one of the greatest disciplines I could be offering to my patients, was to be looking at my own medicine, my medicine of self-care and self-love. So really, for the next few minutes today, I'm going to ask all of you to maybe surrender as much as you can, as much as you're comfortable, and allow us, myself and our amazing team today. And I really just want to take that in, the team, the Kensington team, the families, the people who really make this experience possible today. And you're going to love Christina, you're going to love Lisa. And I hope at the end of this experience today, you go, oh my gosh, I'm feeling less afraid. I'm feeling more open. I'm more ready to prioritize my self-care. You know, I'm going to read something that this came out a couple of weeks ago, and I think all of us are going to go, oh my gosh, that just really, really, it really hits me in my heart. And I really wanted to hear this almost as a validation to what I'm feeling these days. And I think many of us will relate to this, as sobering as it is, but maybe it gives us permission to begin healing again. So the Deloitte company actually did a study about 6 months ago to try to figure out where we were as a country in relationship to fatigue and burnout and overwhelm. And that's what this study was all about: fatigue, burnout, and overwhelm. And what they found out is that literally over 65% of the country today, 6 months ago, was feeling one or all three of those experiences. And I think if I could see you today and we were all together in real life and in person, I think we'd all be nodding at each other. And maybe we'd even be shedding a tear because it's like validating. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm not alone. More than 60% of us are feeling a sense of, oh my goodness, I am too tired to keep running. I'm too scared to stop. What do I do? Well, Deloitte went on because they were so taken and sobered by their research. They did a follow-up nearly half a year later, just a couple of weeks ago. And what they found out, that number's risen to over 70%. So what has happened in the last 6 months that wasn't happening these last few years? I look at that clinically and I say, oh my goodness, I think it comes down to the fact that we are still trying to kind of control the world, and the world continually comes back at us and says, you know what, you can't. And I think we are then left with, what can I do to control, or at least begin to have an influence on myself, my immediate environment? I'm a big believer that our inner atmosphere creates a lot of our outer weather. And today we're going to focus a lot on how it is that we as caregivers, we as people trying to navigate these unprecedented times, really find a place back in our heart to begin again with the prioritization of our self-love, our self-care, our self-compassion, and really give ourselves an opportunity, maybe with fresh eyes. I'm a huge believer that soft eyes is a practice that they talk about a lot in Buddhism, which simply means that first thing in the morning when we wake up and we go to see ourselves, first thing in the morning we turn the light on, we're getting ready to brush our teeth, we lay eyes on ourselves. And what we know in medicine is that those first few moments when we're laying eyes on ourselves, there's an opportunity. And they call it the soft eyes window, where we're looking at ourselves and the first thing we see, hopefully, we can say or think to ourselves, I see you, I accept you, and I love you. And I'm going to be with you today. I'm not going to distance myself from who you are and how you want to be seen today. I'm with you. And I think that practice really sets a tone for how I want today to be. I want you to know that I see you, and Lisa and Christina see you, Susan sees you, the Kensington community, we see you. And we want you really to allow, hopefully, beginning today, a brand new way of considering what your self-care looks like. And I want to kind of break this down over these next couple of minutes before we bring Lisa and Christina in to just a couple of simple things that are literally so powerful. You're going to go, really, James? They really, really work? Well, these really, really do work. And it really comes down to a powerful hormone, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, and you've heard of it. It's called oxytocin, often called the love hormone, the cuddle, the hug hormone. It's the hormone that is so responsible these days for helping us to navigate self-care, helping us to trust ourselves with our self-care. And if self-love and acceptance seem like it's very far away from you these days, building oxytocin systematically, predictably throughout the day is one of the most powerful ways that we not only help ourselves to soften those eyes, but studies show it's a powerful predictor of heart health. It plays into cognitive health. It certainly helps with emotional resilience. And fascinating enough, it's also one of the most powerful things that we can do to build trust. Literally, oxytocin is the trust hormone that happens with all of us around. And I think we look at these last couple of years and we can think about what's happened in politics. We can think about what's happening in the world. We can think about having masks on. And incidentally, when we have masks on, one of our primary cues for trust in releasing oxytocin is to be able to see a smile. And because we haven't seen the smiles we're used to, and you couple that with social distance and not being able to hug the way that we're accustomed to and love to, all of those things have depleted our oxytocin when you couple that with stress and all the things that have felt so unpredictable and so out of our own control. So today, as we begin, I want to walk you through a couple practices. And this is really interesting. what we know about oxytocin is that self-care, and I've got a couple things I don't want to make sure I actually get all of these, because this is sort of a day in the life of oxytocin, equating to trust, equating to managing our health, equating to a mental, emotional well-being. And yes, a softening of those eyes around self-judgment and self-contempt when it comes to, oh my goodness, I'm really going to put me on the front of my to-do list, and I'm going to really allow myself to love myself deeper and more unconditionally than ever. So self-care number one, this is a beautiful one, music. And there was a great study that was done. So if you have a partner in your life, a family member, a memory of a partner, a loved one, and you have a song, could be a wedding song, could be the first date song, could be a song in your life that you go, oh my gosh, this is my song. Studies show when we play that song sometime during the morning on our way to work or when we're grabbing breakfast, doing things, rather than having the news on, put on your song. And it's one of the most powerful ways to lower stress hormones like cortisol, bump up dopamine, which is associated with motivation and confidence. And at the same time, yes, it helps to release oxytocin. So I think maybe then one of the things we'll do is we'll have a Kensington playlist for all the songs that actually we all believe are the songs that help us to feel that sense of connection and love and possibility. So along with music, getting outdoors, and a study showed that literally as little as 8 minutes, first thing in the morning, when we get outdoors, we allow ourselves to get our face into the morning sun. We breathe in the fresh air. Hopefully it's fresh where you live. All of those things help to create a hormonal cascade of building trust and building harmony and helping us to lower anxiety and stress. And again, helping to boost our oxytocin levels. So those three things, right? We have our soft eyes. We move from soft eyes to our love song. We take it outdoors. And yes, if you're feeling so motivated, taking as little as a 6-minute walk, just 6 minutes. Doesn't have to be a speed walk where you're, where people are going, what is she up to this morning? Just take a walk and allow yourself to breathe the fresh air, take it in. And this is, I think this is so important. When we set an intention and we follow through on making good on our good intentions, the research shows that we actually get more benefits. So I'd love for you to say, you know what? I'm doing the love song. I'm going to really work on the soft eyes. I'm going to go outside and really be present for each of those 3, 4, or 5 things that we're talking about today. Because when you're more present for them, they work better. They help us to get that much greater of a response neurochemically and physiologically. And no question, it helps our emotion and our spiritual well-being to really take the full effect. So on top of that, we have meditation. We talked about the fact that we also have these last 2 things, and I love these. Expressing love. When I think about Kensington, the first thing that comes to mind is the expression of love. Susan was sharing her story of her dad and how the Kensington family and really enveloped her and her family with love, that expression of love. And I think here as caregivers, this is just an automatic for you. You easily and effortlessly at times just say, oh my gosh, expressing love, that's my superpower. That's what I love to do more than anything else. But when it comes to prioritizing that expression of love towards yourself, I think that is one of the most sacred, beautiful things that we can offer. In times like these, where I feel more and more it's heroic these days to keep our lights on, to not acquiesce to what's going on around us. Because to dim our light, to make the world more comfortable, isn't the way. But to give ourselves permission to begin within and practice certain things that we go, you know what? This has become my non-negotiable. This is my personal practice of self-care that I absolutely place into my life with reverence. And I do not let it slip away, no matter how much is going on in my life. There's this beautiful quote that the Okinawans have. And the Okinawans, yes, they are blessed with having the greatest number of centenarians in the entire world. They're celebrating more 100th birthdays than anywhere else. They tend to have the lowest incidence of Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, cancer. They're just vital, healthy people. And what's interesting, when researchers started to look at Okinawans decades ago, they said, oh my gosh, it must be all the plants they eat. They're eating lots of sweet potatoes and they're eating greens and they have lots of fish in their diet. And there's no question. All of those things help the Okinawans to live long and strong. But what they also found is that there was a emotional and very much a spiritual predisposition to life. And it was simply this: Ikigai means I have a reason to get up in the morning that's bigger than me. I have a reason to rise in the morning that's bigger than me. And what it is that they equated to, they felt like their self-care, the way they moved through life, the way they expressed love, the way they took care of themselves, was a form of contagion. It was like permission for anyone who had the blessing of laying eyes on them. It was for them service. It was for them being a contagion for love. So as we get ready to bring in Lisa and Christina, if you have any questions about, oh my gosh, really? Me prioritizing my self-care and then going out in the world and expressing that love for myself, what does that really do? I think what it does is gives others permission to follow you, to copy you, to emulate you. And that is high service today. That may be the most important, most beautiful work of our life, to demonstrate that. So I'm now going to take in, and oh my goodness, I feel like this is one of the greatest experiences I'm going to have over this next half hour, is bringing in Lisa Bricker and Christina, Christina and Neil, and I'm sorry guys, my dyslexia precedes me sometimes. And I want to make sure Christina Neill Bowen, I just want to make sure I get Christina's full name in. Lisa Bricker and Christina Neill Bowen, can you all both come in now? There you are. Christina, sorry about that. It's the extra name in the middle that threw me for a loop.
No problem.
Thank you. So, number one, thank you so much for joining us today. And, you know, just because the spirit of oxytocin and some of the things that I've learned about through meeting you a few weeks ago, I think as we kind of get into what we want to talk about today, would you be open and share with us what it is that, maybe beginning with you, Lisa, when you think about self-care and you think about maybe your own personal practice, given your personal story, anything that you can share that would give our community maybe that permission to say, oh my gosh, what Lisa was talking about really hits my heart and makes me feel like I can do this. That makes me feel possible.
Thank you. I loved what you were saying about trying to fix things around us and fix the world. And I think when we're starting out as a caregiver, it's really easy to just try to make sure and control everything that's going on. And I took care of my father first with lymphoma, then my mother had dementia, and then my husband had early, young age Alzheimer's for 15 years. I had to learn the hard way to learn how to take care of myself. And I think I learned over time to surrender, or I wasn't going to make it. It was that serious. I ended up having to call 911 on myself one time and spend 2 nights in the hospital. And it was the cardiologist because of heart palpitations. He said, "You're okay this time, but next time maybe not. And this is a long journey." And I started to surrender. And I made my journey with my husband a spiritual journey. And I meditate, I do yoga. If I can take it to the mat, I can make it through. And it is. I also believe that being a family caregiver is a leadership position. And if we're not going to lead the way and step up, then, you know, we may not be so lucky, and we have to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps sometimes. And we need support. We can't do it alone.
Gosh, Lisa, thank you. That word surrender is often misconstrued, right? Like surrender is a giving up or giving in. And it's also, I love how you put it and framed it. It's an opening.
It's
It's an opening. And I love what you said about taking it to the mat. I think for anyone who's a yogi out there will say, oh my goodness, sometimes I have to sit this one out, getting on the cushion, getting on the mat, and allowing ourselves to surrender and allow whatever our heart is wanting to guide us to understand, that sometimes our mind intellectually would love to tell us, but our heart actually has the wisdom.
yes, it's a love journey.
Oh my goodness, is it ever? And the love story, oh my goodness, it has so many opportunities for personal growth. And in that personal growth, sometimes the act of surrender over and over again.
It doesn't always feel like love, but we can talk about that later. Right?
That's so truly so. Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you. Christina, tell me, and when you hear that word self-care in the work that you do out in the world at a very large scale, how does that work? And I know you've got a young family and you've got lots going on in your world. So you're out there taking care of the world, and you come home and you have another world to take care of as well.
Yeah, gosh. I love everything Lisa said. When I hear self-care, I guess I think about, well, I guess first of all, I work in the policy space in caregiving. So I work as a contractor for the federal government as they're trying to set caregiving policy. And now I have some work with foundations as they're trying to fund caregiving and come together and think about what things are important to fund. So, we've never had a caregiving strategy in this country until right now. There was legislation in 2018 that kind of said we need a national plan for caregiving, and not just for the government, but for philanthropy, for local communities. So I love that quote that Rosalind Carter, former First Lady Rosalind Carter says, like, there's only 4 types of people in the world: people who were caregivers, people who are currently caregivers, and that's like 1 in 7 of us right now. That's a lot. People who will be caregivers, and then the rest of us who will, 2/3 of us will probably need care at some point in our lives, right? So when I hear that, it's like, and working with caregivers, sometimes people can feel so alone, but it's such a common experience that so many of us have. So I think we haven't really acknowledged that yet, like as a country, as a community, like that this is a common experience. And so sometimes the self-care does get like swept under the rug because you're just doing what you're doing. So I loved all the things Lisa said, and I think that I would say that one thing I was working with someone once who told me to do was like write yourself a list and just go down the 5 senses, right? And like, you touched on one of them. So like hearing, like, what's your favorite song? But is there a candle you have that can elicit your favorite smell? Or is there like some sort of touch, massage, or acupuncture? Those are some of the things that I take advantage of. But just sometimes keeping a list is helpful because I think we just get so caught up in it. And it could be as simple as like putting your favorite song on, but we forget to do it because we just get so caught up. So that was a long answer, but basically,
Christina,
yeah,
it was a great answer. And I think what you said is really important. It's kind of old school for a lot of us, but we say, oh my gosh, writing things down. Well, this is really interesting. And then we'll go into what we're going to talk about today. But I think a lot of us are list makers, and a lot of us like to write down what it is that we'd love to get done that day, accomplish. And here's what's really interesting. And many of us have switched to our phones rather than writing things down. Well, what we know is that when we write down what it is that we want to accomplish, a goal, an intention for the day, and we actually put pen or pencil to paper, we actually recruit over 10,000 neural pathways to help us, to guide us to actually make good on those good intentions. If we type it in or put it on our phone, less than 600 neural pathways. Wow. And I think that goes back to sort of the primal epigenetics of using our hands and creating things, and mudra with meditation. So Christina, I love it. Like, don't forget to love yourself. And here's the sensory ways that we can incorporate loving ourselves. Like, put a time to it, put a place that you're going to do it. You're right, because we can so easily have the greatest of intention, and all of a sudden life and the cadence of life grabs us. 14 hours later, we're sitting on the couch watching bad television and going, what happened? And I really want to maybe encourage, as we begin this afternoon's conversation, number one, what you all did, you showed up today. You made a date and you set an intention, you're here. Beautiful. So let's move in. And Christina, because you were talking a little bit, actually quite eloquently, about the work that you do in the world when it comes to policy. And there's a question I think all of us would really love to know. Where do I start, and how come this experience is not covered by Medicare?
Yes, such a question that we get all the time in our field, right? Because you think you work and you pay into Social Security and Medicare, but so much of the caregiving that we do and so much of the care that we need is not medical like primary care, but it's assistance with meal preparation or transportation or laundry or grocery shopping. And then personal care tasks too, that we need to get up in the morning and get going for the day and get washed and get ready. So those things are called long-term care, long-term services and supports, and they're not typically covered by Medicare. If you're very, very low income, they might be covered by Medicaid, but something that the federal government is really trying to figure out right now is, how do we deal with this? Because there's so many more people living longer, and then people having disabilities that living long into life and Alzheimer's and dementia. And so people need this care. And the place that people most want to receive it is in their homes for as long as they can. So a lot of times it's just getting that information out and helping people understand where they can get that support. And for caregivers, this is critical, right? Because I don't think anyone, like, a lot of times caregiving is like, happens overnight. All of a sudden you're a caregiver. You didn't expect it. You didn't know it was coming. And so having to reacclimate and think about all those options that exist, you don't even know the questions that you should be asking, right? When you're interacting with some of the professionals. So that is a question that I've gotten a lot when working with caregivers. Like, I don't even know where to start. So I think it's, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it is overwhelming. And I think one of the overwhelming things is that there's no roadmap for this. And like, I have to grab this service over here and this one over here. So one of the things that I did earlier in my career was work as a geriatric care manager. And I think Lisa does some of this work too, it sounds like from her bio, but just working with someone to help you kind of navigate, and someone who knows what all your different options are, I think is a really useful piece of advice. So seek out those people. And I think they're called aging life care specialists these days, but you can go to the website and see who in your community is available to do that. And then there's also area agencies for aging in every community that you can contact, and you can get to them by going to Eldercare Locator. But they have a lot of information about community services and housing options and support. So I guess that's what I would say for where would I start. Don't try to tackle it all yourself, I guess. That's the message.
Christina, I think number one, there's two things you said. I love the quote by Rosalind Carter. I think that right there sort of helps to, number one, create community, right? Everyone has some kind of experience with this. Mm-hmm. It's either we're in it, it's coming, or we will be a part of it, an experience of being taken care of. And that in a moment, I think I always, I love the work of Brene Brown when she talks about vulnerability. I think she says being the birthplace of common humanity. Caregiving is common humanity. This is where we all will be or getting ready to be. And how you just so eloquently helped us steward us and saying, hey, listen, it's out there. There's no one track. There's many based on your story and where you are, but it's out there, and you just have to be willing to be vulnerable and ask the questions.
Yeah, agreed.
So the permission that you just gave us all is so helpful, right? Because it's hard sometimes to be in a place where you go, I don't know. How do I begin? Well, guess what? Most of us don't know, and there's no exact science to this, but there are resources. Don't be afraid to start asking questions.
Definitely.
Thank you. So Lisa, when you opened up a few moments ago, and I know that I felt in my heart as you were sharing about your journey, starting with your dad, and then your mom, and then your husband. And I think I would love to know, and I'm sure all of us would really love to hear from your perspective, all those different experiences with people you love so deeply and dearly. Were they different? How were they different? And how did you show up for each of those in each of those experiences, being that all of them were so close?
It was, my dad was diagnosed with lymphoma, stage 3 in 2005. So it took everyone by surprise. And I was the one that jumped in, and you have no idea what you're getting yourself into when you become a family caregiver, with all the good intentions and trying to save somebody, right? And I would say I did a lot of things well, but then I had no idea the toll that it would take, or the responsibilities that it would entail, or navigating, like Christina said, all of a sudden you're in a hospital and you don't know the world. And I think resources are the key in creating an inner circle. So I didn't know resources. I didn't have an inner circle. It can be very lonely, isolating journey. My father, I was thinking of this, my father's journey was fairly short because he passed away within a year. So there was a beginning, a middle, and an end. But then when it comes to dementia or Alzheimer's, that's a different journey. The protocol is different. I always say Alzheimer's and dementia goes against everything a doctor ever learned in medical school. There's no cure, there's no treatment, there's no protocol. It becomes it's an emotional disease, and it becomes managing overwhelm and anxiety and quality of life. And so we all have to kind of, learn how to do that. And so that was very different. And learning how to take care of myself and taking care of others. But it is about the resources and collecting it. And everything I've learned is in the rearview mirror, because there is no roadmap. And so I just try to be that person that I wish I'd had along the way every day. Yeah.
Lisa, and gosh, I want to do this with love and respect and ask you one more question. Because you said, looking in the rearview mirror, some of the things that maybe you would have done differently. I think some of us right now be looking in the mirror and seeing potentially preview of coming attractions, and maybe wondering, from your perspective, is there anything you could say, you know what, everybody, this is one of the areas that, gosh, it was a blind spot for me. I missed it.
There are blind spots, but I think we have to give ourselves a lot of credit for, if we have good intentions and we're just doing our best, it's life. It's life. If we're trying to do our best. Yeah, I wish you can't just show up and know it all. It's impossible. And you can't do it alone. So, yes, definitely could have learned a lot, kind of the school of hard knocks. But if you approach it with love and don't be afraid to ask for help and find those people that you can trust. I just started creating a circle of trusted advisors where I always say to families, safety, quality of life, and peace of mind, those 3 things. And then I started following that myself. So that has to do with every major decision that I make in my life. And I follow that as well. So just to add, we're all trying to, a lot of people spend a lot of money trying to be present in the world. And there's no greater teacher than being a caregiver and being present, especially with Alzheimer's and dementia, because our loved ones are in the present moment. So if we can remind ourselves in practice to be in the present moment, we've given ourselves a gift.
Well, Lisa, that is pure gold. That is pure gold. I think that that's something everyone today, it was interesting. A recent study that was done at Harvard, you might have seen, it was talking about the lack of presence that we have today. And I think they said that the average American is only here 47% of their life. 47%. And they went on to say that the other 53% were in future fear or past regret. And it's one of the primary drivers for depression and anxiety. So the lesson or the opportunity to be present, to give ourselves the experience of being in the moment. Like you said, we're investing a lot of energy and money trying to figure out how to become in the moment. And there's no greater teacher than life. Life is.
And we all have bad days and we all have tough days. I think we need to share that too, because we can be up here saying how, like we know it all, but no, it's a daily practice.
Yeah, it's really interesting, I think, for all of us who are in this community and thinking a lot about how control comes up a lot for us and are wanting to kind of hold things together to the best of our ability. And perfectionism tends to creep in, and how perfectionism really drives a lot more of that sense of I'm trying to keep it together when I know everything is falling apart. Mm-hmm. And how what I think you just coached us all and loved us into that experience of, hey, you know what? This is life. It's hard. It has little miracles of life that are interspliced in the middle of it all. Mm-hmm. And don't miss any of it. Be as much present for as you can and you're willing to be, because there's so many beautiful lessons that want to come through it.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Christina, another question I have for you. What are the trends nationally in caregiving, and how are government and philanthropy actually responding? You said there's a lot of unique and cool, positive changes that are happening, as much as it feels like it's, oh my goodness, it's everywhere. And just begin by asking questions. Are there some trends that you say, this is really promising, that finally government is catching on to the need for having policy around caregiving, and their willingness to actually invite others, philanthropy and others, to come in and say, let's steward this trend. Let's help make it real.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there were a number of things leading up to this, the RAISE Act legislation in 2018. But one of the major drivers, I think, was the AARP has been looking at, and I think there was a question in the chat about this, they've been looking at the financial value of family caregivers. And so they were doing all this modeling, and they came up with, every couple of years they revise, but it's like something like $470 billion of caregiving is given out by family caregivers in this country. And so at the time they published that first report, it was like, that's larger than like Walmart's profits or whatever. So it was like, wow, like it was called valuing the invaluable. So it put a mark on this, and I think it really got attention. There was another, like the National Academy of Science and Engineering also put out like a report in 2014 that said, like, these are all the problems and there's really not a coordinated response to this. And so those things kind of led up to this legislation, but I want to read this because I don't want to get it wrong, because the legislation for the Recognize, Assist, Include, Support, and Engage Caregiver Act is to create a national family caregiving strategy with the aim is to enable family caregivers to provide the best care possible without sacrificing their physical, mental, emotional, and financial well-being in the process. So isn't that what we're talking about right now? Like this plan is going to support family caregivers so they can continue to care, but without sacrificing that stuff that's like them being a thriving human being, right? So we have a national plan for that now. So basically, there was a report to Congress last fall, and they said these are the 5 priority areas, and these are the 26 recommendations. And now all the federal government agencies are like putting their actions together, and then philanthropy is putting their actions together. There's a really cool thing you can go Google called the Care Fund, and that's being funded by some major foundations. But there are these movements that are happening, and I think people are finally recognizing that this is an under looked at population, and that we've just we've been doing this for so long, but now we're going to have some coordinated strategy around it. And so it's modeled after the National Alzheimer's Plan, which came about 10 years ago and has stimulated immense research in Alzheimer's disease. So excited to see where this is going, because I think it's really getting some of the best minds together around it. They had an advisory panel made up of experts in the field, but also actual family caregivers in all types of different caregiving situations. And so it's very promising. I think there's definitely a lot of hope for this coming together of people.
Wow. Christina, that's really promising and really encouraging.
It is. Yeah. And you can go I'll share the link. I think there's a video that explains what the plan is that I think I shared with Susan. So hopefully she can get that out to participants.
Oh my gosh, that would be so helpful. So yes, please, if you can share that with us, I think all of us want to know. And I think the more that we engage with those services, the more those services go, oh my gosh, there's true relevance here. People are engaging with us. The more that we are putting energy into things, the more the energy grows. Thank you, Christina. Lisa, I want to ask you one more question, because I know that you are part of the Alzheimer's and Dementia Family Support Group that you help to facilitate here at Kensington. Can you tell us more about that and the work that you do?
Sure. And Christina, I just am fascinated with everything you know. You have a wealth. It's so interesting. Public policy is so interesting. And we need those resources. Yes. My company is called Gently Guided. I'm an Eldercare Consultant and an Alzheimer's and Dementia Placement Specialist. But my background's coaching, and I believe in leadership coaching. And I was asked to facilitate the Kensington Alzheimer's and Family Support Group about 3.5 years ago. Well, we started it about 3.5 years ago. I took it over. We have the most amazing group. We're open to anyone that would like to join us. If you are a caregiver and have a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia, we're here to just support each other. We've been going strong. We have a core group that's incredible. We're peer-to-peer. And so there are no subjects that we don't discuss, because it's all relevant, and all the feelings and all the situations, and everyone's different. We even had someone find us in upstate New York, and we're on Zoom. We're on Zoom the second and fourth Monday of every month at 6 p.m. Pacific time. We go from 6 to 7:30. And it's posted through the Kensington, and it's one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done. It's just really a cool thing. So
that sounds like a really cool thing. Yeah. And I can only imagine how helpful, but how healing that is for people. Like you said, peer-to-peer, sharing stories, having a place that we can say the stuff that isn't the stuff we can maybe feel like we can say out in the world, but here's a safe place for us to talk about it, openly share.
That's right, because we feel every single emotion, and we need outlets, or it's not healthy. And we need that feedback from each other, which is
Lisa, I want to take that with you just for a little moment, because we had a question just come in from someone who asked, I think, a question that I'm sure comes up in your group and in your community. This person was asking, like, okay, when it comes to how the family figures out who's going to be taking responsibility, doing certain duties, or when Susan was sharing about things that she did for her dad and how when we sometimes feel like the unfairness of it all.
Yeah.
And I've worked with a lot of families on the clinical side, and that's the thing I hear and over. This is just the most unfair disease.
Mm-hmm.
And in that experience of that, sometimes we feel like certain people in our life, siblings, may or may not step up the way that we have, or we're wondering how that equanimity, if you will, can translate into real life. And when it doesn't translate into real life, how do you help to steward that and help coach people? Because that's real and that's really, really hard.
Well, that's great. Great question, because I just, my mantra has always been, I don't want anyone to feel like they're alone on this journey. And it can be so lonely. And the families don't really, it's kind of like it ends up being somebody in a family that steps up and ends it up, and the rest of the family, or if you're not in, here's the bottom line. If you're not in the middle of the eye of the storm, it's not the same. Only the people that are really dealing with it day in and day out really understand how difficult it is, especially with Alzheimer's and dementia, because you can have family members that show up to visit, and your loved one rises to the occasion and seems fine, and you can have relatives that say, they seem fine to me. They're really good, and it's really lonely, and we need to share with each other. And there are situations that we just have to get feedback. And I just do my best to make sure everyone is heard. I'll even have side conversations with people. I do not bring in the placement. What I do is as a referral service into these conversations at all. I put my coaching hat on, and we listen and share.
Thank you. That is so heroic and so honest and so needed. I think that's really what I'm learning from my experience on the clinical side, and through my experience here with you today. What I've learned through being with Kensington these last couple of years is that so much of, I think, what we're craving right now within this community's experience is just permission.
Yeah.
We just want permission. I mean, Christina, what you're sharing is the permission to ask questions, to not feel like you should know how to do this, know where to go. Like, I love what you said about, hey, everyone, you know what? There's no absolute roadmap. In fact, it's all over. You can't Google this and be told how to do this. This is going to be something where your individual situation is going to be the way you begin. But once you begin and start asking questions, the angels show up. They start to help steward the journey so you can get the answers you're looking for. But what you said, Christina, about don't be afraid to ask questions, because in that questioning, the permission is granted, I think, for others to come in and rally around us to help us navigate.
Absolutely.
So as we get ready to close, I just want to see Susan, number one, thank you for bringing these two incredible human beings into our life, my life. I feel like Christina and Lisa, I mean, I'm walking away going, it was funny. This morning, I love Stoic philosophy. And so I was reading some Marcus Aurelius this morning, who I think this was a time when he was the emperor, the most powerful person on the planet. And someone asked him in this role, like, Marcus, what is your vocation? And he simply responded, to continually be a better person. And I think, Christina and Lisa, what I'm walking away with tonight is like, the work that you're doing is sort of like permission for us all to think about what would it mean for us to give ourselves permission to be this evolution of this person for ourselves, someone who's that much more loving towards ourselves, accepting towards ourselves. And in that, we hold permission for others to sort of emulate and copy that level of love and compassion and acceptance that I think you've given us today to help us feel okay where we are, not having to know everything, but really where we are as being good enough and loving ourselves in the experience of being there. So I just want to say thank you. I love the two of you for who you are and what it is that you share with me today. I walk away more whole and more hopeful because of the work that you're doing. Thank you. And Susan, I'll bring that back to you.
Well, this was such an incredible webinar and so much good information that really just spanned, just answering questions for everyone and making everyone feel more present. And Christina, I loved what you said about Rouse and Carter, because when I felt like overnight I went from being a daughter to a caregiver, I felt like, what's a caregiver? And I remember hearing about Rouse and Carter saying, we will all be caregivers. We either are, or we need, or we will. And I love that. And I loved, Lisa, what you said about the rearview mirror. And that gave me such good perspective, because I kind of have a philosophy. I don't want to live my life in the rearview mirror. I want to be present. I don't want to be in that 47% category, but sometimes you have to reflect on the rearview mirror to move forward. And I loved what you said on that. And I thought that brought really good perspective. And the goal today about being present, I think if you can be present, I think that that energy will shed off of you and to others. And you know what? I love the circle of love. I'll call it the circle of love, but the circle of relationships, because I think if you can really write down who's in my tribe or who's in my camp, I think it really is helpful for our mental health. My Iggy Gao, probably pronounced that wrong, but to get up in the morning, put music on, don't put the news on, get up in the morning, put music on. And I think it was Dr. James that told me, of course, he gets up before the sun, but when you get up in the morning and the days are longer now, go outside and just feel the sun. It's amazing. I've been doing it, and it takes a minute, and it's just wonderful. But before we leave, Christina, there is a question for you in the Q&A, and I don't want to leave anyone without the question. And it's from Christiana. And it says, in terms of caregiving policy, is there any serious recognition of the significant financial hit, including Social Security contributions and retirement savings for those of us that had to leave work for caregiving?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I know this might sound kind of dry, but if you go and look at the report to Congress, what they did is they worked with the National Alliance for Caregiving, and they compiled 26 caregiver stories that you can go out and watch on YouTube, and they're interspersed in the report to Congress because they wanted to put a human face on this issue. And so absolutely, there are stories of people that like you're saying, Christiana, like bankrupt themselves caregiving, and we don't want that to happen. So there's definitely an equity focus here on if you're really rich, you can afford supports. If you're really poor, you can go on Medicaid, but there's a ton of people right in the middle that can't afford the supports and don't want to impoverish themselves to get on Medicaid. So that's absolutely an issue that's being looked at. But I encourage you to go check out the report to Congress, because it's not like a dry report to Congress. It's got wonderful personal stories, and those stories are actually on the YouTube channel. I dropped the link in the chat, so you can check them all out there, as well as the compilation video, which is a bunch of stories together. So
to all of our audience today, you will be receiving a copy of the webinar. Share it with friends and families. There'll be links to what Christina was talking about that we should all watch. I watched it. It's very powerful. And also links to join Lisa Brooker's support group. I've actually fortunately been able to witness some of that, and it's such a powerful conversation. And you can include that now in your circle of love or your circle of support. But with that, I just want to say thank you. Oh, there's one more question that is true to my heart, and it talks about guilt. What about guilt? How to take breaks? Oh dear, guilt is just I'll let you guys all answer that real quickly here, because we have about 3 minutes, but Guilt was the hardest thing through my journey. I felt guilt about everything, guilt about not being a mother, guilt about not being a good enough caregiver, so go ahead. I'll let Lisa, why don't we start with you quickly?
Guilt is part of the territory.
Yeah.
It just is. And that's part of what we talk about a lot, especially when you guilt to take care of yourself, guilt to place yourself first, guilt to move your loved one when you can no longer take care of them. It's like leaving your child on the corner and driving away. But you get a bigger team out of it, but yeah, it is heart-wrenching, and we can move through it together.
Okay, Christina, any thoughts on guilt?
I just think it's the gift that keeps on giving. It's there, right? And that's all I have to say.
Yeah.
I think it should be a 4-letter word. Go ahead, Dr. James, anything about guilt?
Oh gosh, you both said it so perfectly, Lisa and Christina. I think what you said, Susan, a moment ago, and I know this is going to sound kind of contrived, but beginning the morning before you give to the world by taking even just one moment, like you said, getting outside, putting your face in the sun. Research shows that if we can just align with a circadian rhythm, which is just the rhythm of the sun and the moon, I know it sounds hippy dippy, but research shows it helps a lot with our limbic system, the place we hold our emotions, in particular, our guilt. So if we can do one habit of love and self-care before we go out and care, and that can help us to kind of start to create a bit of traction and more opportunities to find the windows, those micro windows of self-care, which can help to lower the guilt, but the guilt is never going to go away. We can help ourselves to make friends with it and coexist with it.
Yeah. Go out in the morning, welcome the sun, scream, and then go inside and put some music on.
Put on your favorite love song and just, you know what? Lean into life. Lean into life.
And one more thing, just know that you're doing the best you can.
I know. So thank you everybody for joining us today. And thank you for our unbelievable presenters. Thank you. We have to do this again. Everybody have a good and safe night.
Thank you, everyone. Love and blessings.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.